All right, so since Adobe announced the updates to Adobe Lightroom with Classic and CC back at Adobe Max last year, one of the most common questions I've seen is whether it's worth it to switch over from Adobe Lightroom Classic to the newer Adobe Lightroom CC. And, I didn't want to just put out some videos and stuff saying that, yes, just do it or no, don't do it. I wanted to actually immerse myself in the migration process, see what the kind of pros and cons are, if there are any shortcomings, and then share my thoughts with you so that you can make an educated decision as to whether this new workflow works for you. Now, before we jump in, let me put this out there. Adobe provided me with a year subscription to the full Creative Cloud suite, as well as 10 terabytes of Adobe Creative Cloud storage. Now, you don't need the full suite to use this video to migrate from Classic to CC. There are options specifically for photographers, and you may not need 10 terabytes of space. However, that's on you. You need to figure out what your space requirements are and whether the cost associated with it is worth it. Now, Adobe did not pay me 1 cent to do this video. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm just doing this because so many people have asked me about this migration ever since I mentioned that I'm going to be moving over pretty much whole hog from Classic to CC. So I want to put this video together. So with that, let's start with the pros. So it goes without saying that probably the number one pro for moving over from Classic to CC is that you have pretty much instant backups of all of your original RAW files. Once you start importing photos into Adobe Lightroom CC, it's going to begin uploading them to the cloud, and those RAW files will be available there for you, as well as giving you the option of keeping local copies of the RAW files in case you want to have local backups, which is what I do personally. Next is probably the most important pro for me with Lightroom CC, and that is it eliminates the need to manage one singular catalog. Lightroom Classic is kind of an antiquated database technology where you can only work on one individual catalog, and if you travel elsewhere, you have to work on a separate catalog and then down the line migrate them somehow together. And it's always been a very convoluted process for me because merging the photos from a trip with my main photo catalog, there was always some inherent issues. So with Lightroom CC, think of your catalog being managed in the cloud, and that leads me to the next pro, which is now you can have as many computers, smartphones, tablets accessing that centralized tablet. So you can have access to all of your photos and all of your edits on any device at the same time. And let's say you go on a trip somewhere and you decide to import your photos on your phone or your laptop. Those will get uploaded, assuming you have bandwidth. Remember, you need an internet connection. But they'll get uploaded, and then when you get home, they'll be already waiting for you on your home computer. And to me, that is one of the kind of missing steps in my workflow that I've been waiting for many years. Like I mentioned, it also syncs your edits. So if you work on your home computer on a photo, those edits will appear on your phone and on any other device that's linked to Adobe Lightroom with your Adobe account. Now, in addition to syncing edits, it also syncs metadata like the title and caption and the tags associated with the photo. And that's important for me because a lot of times when I'm traveling, I've got just dead time where I don't have anything to do. So what I'll do is I can now take my phone, open up a bunch of photos that I've marked that I want to share to my stock portfolio on Stocksy, and then add the captions, the tags, and everything. And basically all I need to do is upload the full res JPEG, which I can do from my phone or from any computer. So basically it allows me to use my free time more effectively without worrying about kind of asynchronous editing issues with tags and metadata. Another pro that's actually very worth bringing up is that with the new Adobe Lightroom CC workflow, it does a really nice job of seamlessly migrating the photos you take with your camera, whether it's a DSLR or mirrorless, as well as your smartphone photos. Listen, let's not ignore the fact that a lot of us take photos that are really good with our smartphones. The cameras and the sensors have become stupidly good on them. So rather than kind of have all these different workflows where your mobile photos are maybe with Apple Photos or Google Photos or here or there, now you can automatically import them into Adobe Lightroom CC and have them available everywhere. More importantly, you also have access to the editing controls of Lightroom CC, which is really nice. You don't have those kinds of controls in some of the other apps. Also, I found that Adobe Lightroom CC is way faster. I mean, seriously faster than Classic. And that's a huge pro for me, just being able to flip through photos, cull them quickly, and then also edit them I find that to be a lot snappier. And then probably one of the coolest, probably most forward-thinking pro with Adobe Lightroom CC is that it genuinely offers you an option of eliminating a laptop. So if you go on a trip and weight is a serious concern, you don't need to bring a laptop here. You can bring a tablet or even just a smartphone. And because all of these devices currently can import raw files, you know, whether you're using a wireless hard drive like those from Western Digital, or you're just connecting your camera or an SD card reader directly to your smart device, you can ingest those raw files onto your smart device, again, a smartphone or tablet, and have the raw files backed up and have all of the same benefits, but without the added weight of a laptop. Now, of course, with the good come the bad, so let's talk about the cons. Without a doubt, the number one con that a lot of users are feeling is the cost. So depending on how much data you need, how much storage you need in the Adobe Cloud, that can get pretty expensive. 10 terabytes, I believe, costs about $100 a month. That can get prohibitively expensive for a lot of photographers. So until Adobe figures out that dropping the price or increasing storage for the current offering price is something that needs to be done, you're going to have to figure out whether that investment is worth it. One thing to consider, though, is you don't necessarily have to back up every single photo of yours. There are many workarounds in terms of what files you back up using collections in Lightroom Classic, and we can talk about that in a minute. But if you do want to back up your entire catalog and you do have a lot of files, that might be a serious concern for you. Now, beyond the cost, there's also bandwidth concerns that you have to factor in. If you have a lot of files, every single byte needs to make its way up to Adobe's cloud. Now, things to consider is whether you have a bandwidth cap. A lot of places, especially outside of the United States, have caps in terms of how much bandwidth they can use with uploading. Also, typically, upload speeds are significantly slower than download speeds, so it might take a lot longer to upload your library if it's a big library. Next, some people just don't like being locked into an individual ecosystem. I mean, just ask most Android people who talk about Apple. They don't like the idea of being boxed into Apple's macOS and iOS sandboxes. Same thing goes here. When you upload your photos to Adobe Creative Cloud, you are kind of buying into their ecosystem. Now, that can be a great thing, and to me, it's a great thing because I really enjoy what it offers. But, you know, if you're the kind of person that's skeptical about that, that might not be something you want to do. With that said, let's say down the line you decide, I'm done with this. I don't want to do the Adobe Lightroom cloud thing anymore. There is an Adobe Lightroom downloader tool which will allow you to download whatever you have in the cloud locally. And probably the number one con that you want to consider if you're planning on moving from Adobe Lightroom Classic to Lightroom CC is the lack of feature parity, meaning the things that are currently in Adobe Lightroom Classic that are not in Lightroom CC. These are the things that you're going to have to consider whether they are critical to your workflow. If they are, just stick with Adobe Lightroom Classic for now. Adobe is working really hard to make feature parity. I mean, from Adobe Lightroom CC version 1 to 1.1, they introduced two of the most important features for me that were missing, and that was the tone curve and split toning. So with that brought me to about 90% of what I need to do. But in terms of features that are currently missing, you've got merging with HDR and Pano. You don't have access to camera calibrations. Another one that's super important to me is geotagging. I love geotagging my photos, and not being able to do that is a bummer. However, I still have all the geotagging information, and if and when that feature comes to Lightroom CC, I'll be able to add them retroactively. For those of you that use the print and book functions, that's not in there, as well as multi-image editing, which is something that I don't get. Meaning, if you make an edit to one photo and you want to paste those settings onto multiple photos at once, you can't do that currently. That to me is a glaring oversight. Hopefully they'll fix that. You also don't have any extensive import or export controls. And what I mean by that is when you import your photos into Lightroom Classic, you have access to some cool opportunities like adding metadata, your copyright information, contact information, that kind of stuff. You don't have that ability with Lightroom CC. It's basically import these photos into this album, and that's what you've got. Same thing with export. For me, I rely on an app called JPEG Mini Pro, which reduces the file size of exported JPEGs within the export process. It does it automatically. I don't have access to that in Lightroom CC. I also don't have any access to other options like renaming files on import or export. So that's just something that you have to consider. Also, if you send your photos from Lightroom to third-party plugins like On1 Photo Raw or Luminar or any other third-party app, There is no support for that right now in Lightroom CC. The only third-party app, I guess you can call it, is Photoshop. You can send photos from Lightroom straight to Photoshop. But unfortunately, if you want to use a third party, you have to actually export either the original or a JPEG file to your desktop, open it up in the third-party app, do your changes, save the file, and then re-import into Lightroom CC. Hoping that workflow gets improved in the future, but that is something that is worth considering. And then finally, if you use a lot of presets in Adobe Lightroom CC currently, you can take your presets from Lightroom Classic and import them into Lightroom CC, but those presets do not sync like photos and edits do, meaning if you have a preset pack that you bought from my store, for example, those presets can reside in Lightroom CC on your desktop or on your laptop, but they won't sync throughout your other devices. Now, before we jump over to the computer, where I'll show you how I've been doing my phased migration from Lightroom Classic to Lightroom CC, there's just one thing that I want you to consider. I think there's this preconceived notion that if you want to migrate from Lightroom Classic to CC, you have to do it whole hog, meaning you have to be able to move your entire catalog over and then upload every single photo, and it's going to take forever. That's not true at all. In fact, you've got some pretty granular control in terms of which files and how often you migrate over. And that's exactly what I want to show you now. So don't think this is kind of a, one-shot deal. Over the past few weeks, I've been migrating month by month from my photo library from Classic to CC, and it's been a pretty seamless process. And so what I'd like to do is jump over now and show you exactly how to do that.
All right, so here we are. Let's jump in front of the computer. Before we do anything, I want to show you some of the settings that I have in Lightroom CC on my computer. So if you go to Lightroom CC and then go to Preferences, I have this checkbox: store a copy of all originals at the specified location. And the reason why I like this is because this is the only option that currently allows you to set the folder location for all of your originals. Currently, if you want to have your smart previews stored locally, it for some reason requires you to store them on your internal hard drive, in which case mine's called Macintosh HD. But for the originals, the much larger files, you can set a folder path on any external hard drive. So I have mine set on a volume called Bokeh XL, which is my G Technology 24 terabyte RAID array. And any photo that gets imported in, either on this computer or from any other device, the raw file, the original files, will get downloaded on this computer and then onto that G Technology drive automatically. Now on my laptop, I have the opposite going on. I've got this option where I store a copy of all smart previews on my internal hard drive. So what that means is when I, for instance, go on a trip, I'm going to the Canadian Rockies in a few days. When I import my photos into Lightroom CC, either on my laptop or on my iPad, for example, it will upload the raw files when there is an internet connection, and then it'll remove the raw files from the laptop to reduce space and keep all smart previews, which is about 2560 pixels on the long end, if I remember correctly. And when you select that option, it'll show you what the storage requirements will be on your computer. So you'll know what file space you're going to need if you want to store the smart previews. Now, there's a third option, which you don't store any of them automatically. You just tell Lightroom to store up to a certain amount of the hard drive space. So up to a storage amount where you have 25%, for example, free. And then it'll delete other smart previews. But remember, everything will always be in the cloud. All right, so with that, now, if you look on the left over here, you can see that I've already imported, or migrated rather, all of my photos from 2017, 2016, 2015, and now I am uploading May of 2014. So I've been doing this month at a time. So starting in 2017, I did December, then November, and so on and so forth. And as one month finishes, then I'll migrate the next month from Classic into CC. And the way that you tell kind of the status of what each file looks like is by looking at this little icon on the bottom right of the grid. You can also look at it on the info view. If you press I on your keyboard, that'll toggle the info view. And under sync status, you can see that for this particular file, this icon represents that it's been synced and backed up. And locally, I'm storing the original file, as well in the cloud, the original file is backed up, which is great. Now, let's say you want to know where your original files are being stored on your computer. Remember, I specified mine to be stored on Bokeh XL, that G Technology 24 terabyte drive. Well, here is Bokeh XL on my computer here. It gets put under a folder called Lightroom CC, and then it's this folder here with a bunch of gibberish. Then there's originals, and then you can see here 2015, for example. And then if I go into any of these folders, there are the original files. They are there in, their full resolution, full file size. If you shoot with your camera set to uncompressed, they will be the uncompressed RAWs. So one of the main differences that you will see pretty much right off the bat is, unlike with Lightroom Classic, where if I go to my Lightroom Classic photo library over here and we go to 2015 and then January, you can see that I control the folder hierarchy. But with Lightroom CC, you do not have that control. It basically just dumps them based on the date of the files. So that's just something to consider. Your folder or file hierarchy won't be managed in your Finder or your Explorer. They'll be managed in Lightroom CC. So again, something to consider. All right, and one last thing, you can see here that if you are syncing any folders, there'll be a little icon on the left, this kind of rotating spinning circle. Also on the top right, it'll give you a specific status in terms of how many photos are left to sync. Doesn't give you time because, I guess bandwidth changes, but it's just something to consider. You'll know that if you're synced, if all of the files in a folder are synced, or I should say album, they'll have a check mark next to them. And that actually gives me one last thing that I want to show you, the difference between a folder and an album. In Lightroom CC, folders are what you're going to use to create your hierarchy. So if you want to have a specific hierarchy, you're going to use folders. But you can't put photos in folders. Photos have to go into albums. And you can see when you go to the plus icon here, there's a create album and create folder. So for example, 2015 is a folder, May is a folder, but all of these collections are albums. So if you click on any one of them, that is where your photos go. All right, so now it's time to actually migrate photos from Classic to CC. Now, I have a very specific way of doing this. And when you see it, it's not because I want to make things difficult. This is through trial and error. This is how Adobe kind of makes you do things if you want to migrate this particular way. Now, this way that I'm going to show you is the way, in my opinion, the best way if you want to migrate month by month while also retaining your structure, your file and folder hierarchy that you have in Classic. And it's actually a pretty cool way. So check this out. Let's go to Classic. And the next month that I want to migrate is June. So in June, I've got 2016 photos across all of these individual folders, these subfolders that I created based on each shoot. So this is what I do. First, I go under collections, and you can see I already have collections for 2017 and 2016. So under 2014, which is the current year, I'm going to right click and create collection set. Next, I'm going to type 06-June to kind of match the kind of naming structure that I have. And I'm going to make sure that it's set in the collection set of 2014. So collection sets, just so you know, are what they imply. It's a set of collections in case you want to group multiple ones under one kind of main parent folder. Now, you can't have smart collections set as collection sets or regular collections. That's something important. If you have smart collections, which basically aggregate based on certain criteria like metadata or rating, you're going to have to manually create collections and then move those files over. Just something to consider. All right, so with June created, what I'm going to do is go up here, select the folders under June here in the actual library section, and then drag them down onto June, which is in this collection set. So this doesn't duplicate your files. You're not making copies. It's just creating another reference point as a collection set. So under the collection set 2014, you created a collection set called June. And in here, you've got all of the photos. And now you're ready to start kind of the migration process. So this is what I do. Make sure you select the collection set June. Don't, just right click. Make sure this is highlighted. That is important because it's weird if you don't have it highlighted and you right click and export, it might export a different folder that you have selected. So with this, I right click and I select export this collection set as a catalog. Then I'll go down to my backup volume, which I have called Blades XL, and I'll type in 2014-06. You can see there's already 2014-05, and I'm going to click on export catalog. And this is a pretty quick process. All it's doing is it's writing a Lightroom catalog referencing the photos in this master catalog. Here's where Adobe makes things super weird. Watch, if I go, you would think now if I want to migrate my catalog, I would go to, in Lightroom CC, I would go to File, Migrate Lightroom Catalog, and then we'll go through the process here, and I'll walk you through this again afterwards. I'll hit Continue, Continue, and then I'm going to browse to that catalog that I just created, which is under Blades 2014-06, and there's that catalog. Let's click Migrate and hit Start Scan, and boom, you get this error. So let's click Migrate later to get rid of it. Why is that? Why am I getting that error? It's because if you export a collection set to a new catalog from Classic, in order to migrate it to Lightroom CC, you have to first open that catalog in Lightroom Classic. Just open it and quit. You don't have to do anything. Then you'll be able to migrate over. So you just saw that error. So now let's go to Lightroom Classic. We'll go to File, Open Catalog, point to that catalog that I just created from the June 2014 collection set, and click Open. And you can see here is the catalog. There is the whole folder structure, just like we had it. It also will have any collections that these photos that you have in this month, for example, any collections that they were associated with. So if you don't want that, you can kind of just right click and delete, because these collections will migrate over, and then just click delete over here. And so you just have your collection set there. And now you can go ahead and go to File, Open Recent, and then go back to the original master catalog if that's something you want to do. But more importantly, now you can go into Lightroom CC, and let's try this again. So File, Migrate Lightroom Catalog, click Continue to go through it, and then continue one more time. One of the benefits is when you open that catalog in Lightroom Classic, it now is automatically detected, so you don't have to go find it. Just select it, click Start Scan. Looking good here. And now we'll click Start Migration. Now, depending on how many photos you've got in that month or however you decide to export it, this can take a bit of time, and it even says it when you start the migration. It could take a bit of time because it's analyzing every single file, every photo, every collection, and prepping it for migration. So when you're ready, click Start Migration. All right, here we are done. You can see the migration's complete. About 67 gigabytes and 2016 assets are migrated. Everything looks good, so we are done here. Now, here's the cool thing. Here's why going through the whole collection sets, exporting as a catalog, reopening a catalog, why it's cool and why it'll help with this migration process. Check it out. If I scroll down over here, you can see there is a new folder called Migrated 2014-06, which is basically the name of the catalog. And look, there is June with all of the folders, the hierarchy here that I kept from the original Lightroom Classic. So let's just kind of collapse these folders to make it a little easier to see. And now all I need to do is take June, drag it to 2014, and then I can delete that migrated 2014-06 folder. Don't worry, it won't delete any of the actual files. You're just deleting that reference folder. So delete albums and folders. So that's gone. And now if we go to the status over here, you can see that it's preparing to sync. There are the 2,158 photos, which are the ones from the 2016 that were just brought in, plus the remaining few from the previous import of May. All right, now let's check this out. So here I've got my iPhone 10. I've got Lightroom installed over here. I'm going to launch it. And then you can see there is 2017, and I've got all of my photos over here, as well as 2016, 2015. But if we go to 2014, there's June already there. All of the folders are already here. If I go into one of these folders, you can see the photos that have synced up to the cloud and then back down to the phone. And what's cool is I can go into one of these photos this is the thing. This is what's most kind of important to me with this new workflow is, let's say I'm just hanging out somewhere. Because I've got access to all of my photos, every single one of them, I can edit them using Lightroom controls. I can also edit them using any third-party apps on iPhone, or if you're an Android user, same thing over there. But I can go and go to, for example, keywords and start adding keywords like Australia and, bike, these kinds of things. These are the things that I do when I upload my photos to stock, which is a really important kind of passive income system for me, is uploading the photos there. So because with stock, keywords are so important, I can do that here. I can also go into info and add a title and a caption, which also, when you export the photo, come over. They get translated over, the keywords and the caption and title. So these are little things that I can do. But most importantly is I can just browse through all of the photos kind of very leisurely, find the ones that I've forgotten, and then edit them and share them with everyone, which to me is great because I went and took the photos, but unless I was historically sitting in front of this computer, which has every photo I've taken, this is the only place that I can edit them. But now I can even edit them on a phone like this, which is super cool. All right, so I know I threw a lot at you. By all means, if you've got any questions, leave them down below. I'm really fortunate to have some friends who work at Adobe, specifically a shout out to Josh Haftel, who's fielded so many of my questions. I try to ask as many questions as possible up front to help answer them for you in advance. But if you've got questions, leave them down in the comments section below. Definitely, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. And most importantly, hit the subscribe button so that you get access to all of my future videos. If you want to get notified when new videos come up, hit the little bell icon to get notified. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope this was helpful. I really do believe in Adobe Lightroom CC. I'm not just saying it. I think this is definitely the future of where Adobe's going. I think the power of having cloud computing with your photos is very powerful. Having access to all of your photos wherever they are is powerful. And so it's worth considering. So with that, again, thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.